You know I saved the best for last. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for Chaldea's #1 senpai, Consort Yu. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively and an overall grade, comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. Now, onto her stats. Consort Yu has a max HP of 13,389 and a max attack of 7,970, which becomes 7,173 due to her assassin class modifier. Yu has by far the highest HP of all the 4-star assassins, but she also has the lowest attack. Similarly, when compared to all the other 4-star servants overall, her HP ranks in the top 5, while her attack ranks among the bottom 5. When it comes to her command cards, Yu has 4 hits on her quick, 4 hits on her arts, 3 hits on her buster, and 4 hits on her extra card. She has an NP gain rate of 0.75% and a star rate of 24%. Yu's overall stat spread is heavily defensive with barely any offense to speak of, and she also has very strong NP gain and star generating due to her high rates and high hit counts on all of her cards. Taking a look at her skills, her first skill is Incarnated Spirit rank A. This charges her own NP gauge every turn for 5 turns, between 5 to 10% depending on level, and it also grants herself 1 turn a debuff immunity. Her second skill is Heaven's Feathered Woman rank A. This skill recovers her own HP every turn for 5 turns, between 500 and 1000, and it also increases her own buff removal resistance for 1 turn, between 50 and 100%, both depending on level. This can be upgraded through a strengthening quest to Heaven's Feathered Woman rank A+. It upgrades the buff removal resistance from 1 turn to 3 turns, and it gains the additional effect of increasing her attack between 20 to 30% for 3 turns, also depending on level. And finally, her last skill is Bloodsucker rank C. This skill has between a 60 and 80% chance to drain 1 enemy of their NP gauge, and it also grants her between 18 to 27% NP charge, both depending on level. When it comes to passives, Yu only has 1, and that's Presence Concealment rank B. This increases her own star generation by 8%. As for her deck and Noble Phantasm, Consort Yu has a Buster Quick deck with Quick, Arts, Buster, and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Eternal Lament. This is an AoE Buster attack that deals defense-piercing damage to all enemies, with between a 300 and 500% damage modifier depending on level. In addition, it removes all of her debuffs, inflicts Curse on all enemies for 5 turns, and increases her own Buster card effectiveness for 1 turn between 50 and 100% depending on overcharge. But as a demerit, this NP also removes all of Consort Yu's buffs. Consort Yu's Ascension material requirements include everyone's favorites, Void Dust and Stakes. For her level ascension, she needs 12 Dust, 8 Tranquil Bells, 8 Bloodstone Tears, and 4 Spirit Roots. Dust can be farmed at Charlotte in America with a 64% drop rate. Tranquil Bells drop at the Bomb End Cave in Lost Belt 3 with a 39% drop rate. Bloodstone Tears can be farmed at Shinjuku 2 Chome in Shinjuku, where they have an 18% drop rate, and Spirit Roots have a 12% drop rate at the Holy City in Camelot. For her skills, Yu needs 12 Tranquil Bells, 24 Void Dust, 60 Stakes, and 12 Reactors per skill. Stakes are best farmed at the Gallows Hill in Salem, where they have a 67% drop rate, and Reactors have a 20% drop rate at the Detention Center in Lost Belt 3. Consort Yu is a bombshell beauty. So much so that I'm pretty sure that for 99% of the people rolling for her, her stat sheet is not the first place they're looking. However, her stats are worth considering, because Yu is a very different type of assassin than what we're used to. Right off the bat, her attack is abysmally low, even for her class. But she makes up for it by having a ridiculously high HP stat, as well as insane NP gain on her arts and even quick cards. Her star generating is also fairly above average, which means that she has no issues when it comes to providing stars for the team. This stat spread is perfect for a high utility support, which unfortunately Yu is not. Rather than support, Yu's skill set is much more geared toward NP spam and DPS. Her first skill, Incarnated Spirit, grants Yu debuff immunity for a turn and charges her NP gauge by up to 10% per turn for 5 turns. Debuff immunity is a niche but useful ability to have, especially on someone as tanky as you, because it helps her survive that much longer in boss fights. But the real selling point of the skill is the passive NP gain that it grants. 10% NP charge per turn is a lot, and given that this skill lasts for a full 5 turns with a 5-turn cooldown, that means that it's always active. Yu basically has a free max limit broken Prisma Cosmos on a skill. But that's not the only form of NP charge that she has. Yu also has her third skill, Bloodsucker. This skill has an 80% chance to drain an enemy's NP gauge, and it charges Yu's own NP gauge by 27%. If this skill looks familiar, it should, because it's the same skill that both Uriel and Carmilla have, and it's just as strong on Yu as it is on them. The chance to land the NP drain is quite high, and NP drain is one of the best skills that you can have for difficult fights. But more importantly, the large NP charge makes it easy for you to set up a quick Noble Phantasm for farming, or even for spamming her NP on back-to-back turns. Finally, Yu has her last skill, Heaven's Feathered Woman. At release, this skill gives her a passive HP recovery buff that recovers 1000 HP per turn for 5 turns, and it also increases her own buff removal resist by 100% for a turn. There is a lot to say about this skill because it's vitally important for using Yu well. Firstly, just like with Incarnated Spirit, it's important to note that the uptime of the heal matches the cooldown of the skill, so Yu effectively has a permanent heal every turn, which makes her incredibly tanky. Secondly, the buff removal resist effect is a buff that will prevent her own buffs from being removed for a turn, something that is extremely important when it comes to her Noble Phantasm. This skill also receives an upgrade that increases the buff removal resist to 3 turns instead of just 1, making it significantly better, and it increases Yu's attack by 30% for 3 turns as well, which helps make up for her incredibly low attack stat. Unfortunately though, this skill upgrade is 2 years away. We won't be getting it in NA until the 5th anniversary event in July 2022. With that in mind, when it comes to skill leveling, go for Bloodsucker first just for that NP charge because it's crucial for farming, followed by Heaven's Feathered Woman for the much needed buff removal resist, and then Incarnated Spirit last. Consort Yu's Noble Phantasm is an AoE buster attack that buffs her buster cards by 50% and deals defense piercing damage to all enemies. It also removes Yu's own debuffs and inflicts curse on all her enemies, but it comes with the downside of removing all of Yu's buffs when activated. On its own, this Noble Phantasm is actually very good. The curse damage is negligible, but the debuff removal synergizes very well with Yu's tanky nature, and the defense pierce combined with the free mana burst is a very scary offensive combination. The issue, however, is that Yu has by far the worst demerit in the whole game, requiring her to lose all of her buffs before she NPs. This one demerit destroys the synergy of her entire kit. Keep in mind that the buff removal doesn't just mean damage buffs. It also removes her NP charge and healing buffs from her skills, as well as any invincibility or defensive buffs that she got from teammates. In fact, any buffs given to her by teammates are going to be wasted because this demerit activates before damage, so Yu's NP simply can't be buffed. It's also important to note that the debuff immunity does not prevent this demerit. The only way to get around it is with the buff removal resist, which thankfully Yu has on her second skill. However, this buff removal resist only lasts for 1 turn, and Yu's entire playstyle is based around her spamming her NP. Yu's major strength is being able to spam her Noble Phantasm for DPS and efficient farming, and this demerit prevents her from doing that and turns her into a sitting duck. To make matters worse, even with a 50% mana burst, Yu's Noble Phantasm damage is among the worst in her class, making it difficult to farm all but the weakest enemy waves. Simply put, before her skill interlude, Yu struggles to provide anything to the team other than a one and done NP that isn't even that strong. But thankfully, the buff changes things significantly for her. By extending the buff removal resist to 3 turns and giving her a high uptime attack buff that stacks with her mana burst, Yu's damage noticeably increases and she can be used to farm farm quickly and effectively with multiple NPs. Unfortunately, even post-interlude, she does still suffer from low overall damage and a lack of hard defense. But good farmers are very rare among assassins, so Yu's ability to NP so quickly and frequently is valuable. Just keep in mind that Yu needs to match her own Noble Phantasms to the cooldown on her second skill. Never Noble Phantasm without her buff removal resist active. Consort Yu's demerit also complicates team compositions for her, since an improperly timed Noble Phantasm can waste good buffs. Prior to her interlude, it isn't really worth building around her NP given the restrictions, so instead you can leverage Yu's good star generating to make use of her as a crit DPS. She lacks any crit buffs, so pair her with allies who can give her strong crit damage buffs like Chiron, Osakabe Hime, or Caesar. Chiron and Osakabe Hime both provide powerful crit steroids and can also buff Yu's command cards to give her a big spike in damage. Although if you do plan to use Osakabe Hime, keep in mind that her crit buff interlude doesn't come until the middle of next year. Until then, Caesar is an excellent free-to-play alternative with his targetable crit buff, and the demerit on it doesn't even matter much thanks to Yu's incredible healing skills. Once Yu gets her interlude, it becomes much easier to build her as the NP spammer that she was always meant to be. So pair her with servants who can either buff her NP damage or her NP gain like Semiramis, Archer Altera, and Shakespeare. Altera and Shakespeare both provide a strong targetable NP charge to help you with farming as well as powerful NP buffs. Semiramis also has surprisingly good synergy with you for two reasons. One, she has a 50% Buster resist down debuff, which means that you will have an effective 100% Buster buff on her NP, and two, Semi's own Noble Phantasm will soon receive a buff that increases the party's buff removal resistance by 100%. So as long as you use Yu's Noble Phantasm after Semiramis's, she never has to worry about her own demerit. Yu's Bondcraft Essence is the book that she's reading. It increases the party's Buster and Quick Card effectiveness by 10%. It can be useful if you want to use Yu as just a star generating support, but if you want to use her as a DPS, then go for crit damage craft essences like Knight's Pride, Joint Recital, Victor from the Moon, or Wolves of Mibu. After her interlude, it's better to build around Yu's NP, so use craft essences that can grant her NP damage, NP charge, or Buster card effectiveness, like Aerial Drive, Collide Ruby, Conquest on the Sea of Stars, and Black Grail. One of the best things about Yu is that her perma heal allows her to use powerful CEs like Black Grail and Knight's Pride without any concern for the demerits. In the future, I recommend using Beautiful Dreamer. It starts you off with 50% NP charge, and it increases Buster card effectiveness and NP gain by 10%. It'll be coming out with the upcoming Valentine's Day event. For command codes, Mages of the Flowers can be useful on Yu, since it does work well with her passive NP gain to give her a potential 20% NP charge every few turns. Overall, the Tale of Consort Yu is a tale of two servants. At release, Yu can make use of her NP charge for very quick and easy wave clear, and with good supports, she can even potentially be an okay crit servant. But her abysmally low attack, lack of damage buffs, and the demerit on her NP ultimately prevent her from doing any real damage or even farming. Once Yu receives her upgrade, she becomes much better, able to rely on her stellar NP gain and her plethora of utility buffs to spam her Noble Phantasm without having to worry about the buff removal. But even then, don't rely on her tankiness or power too much, because she still lacks any form of hard defense, and she still deals subpar damage. So all in all, Consort Yu gets 2 grades from me. She gets a C- at release, which is upgraded to a B after her interlude in 2 years. At release, Yu's only saving grace is that she capitalizes on the utter lack of farming assassins in the game. Other than that, she falls short of all the other 4-star assassins and many of the 3-star assassins in nearly every area. But if you're patient enough to wait for her interlude, Consort Yu can become a pretty decent farmer with some good utility. And those are my thoughts on Yu, but like I said in the beginning, if you're rolling for her, I doubt it's because of her gameplay. At least that sure as hell isn't the reason why I'm rolling for her. But what do you think? Let me know why you're rolling in the comments down below. If you haven't already, please do check out my other servant spotlights for the other Lost Ball 3 servants, listed both on screen and in the description down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. and I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.